The diplomatic vessel, Harmony's Dream, slipped through the stars like a ghost, its stealth systems humming with quiet efficiency. Through the observation deck's transparent dome, Sergeant Theo Harrison watched the unfamiliar constellations of the border territories. His reflection stared back at him, a weathered face framed by close-cropped dark hair, eyes that had seen too many conflicts, trying to pretend they hadn't. "Beautiful view," came a voice behind him. "Hard to believe there's a war raging out there." Theo turned to find Ambassador Cross approaching, her diplomatic uniform pristine despite the late hour. "That's usually how it goes, ma'am. Peace looks a lot like war from a distance. It's only up close you see the difference." "Poetic for a Marine," she said with a small smile. "Don't tell my squad. I have a reputation to maintain." Theo allowed himself a rare grin before returning to his professional demeanor. "You should be resting, Ambassador. We enter the contested zone in 6 hours." Ambassador Cross nodded, her eyes returning to the stars. The Vorak High Command agreed to these talks. That's progress of a sort. "With respect, ma'am, the Vorak agree to a lot of things. Following through is another matter." "You don't believe in our mission, Sergeant." Theo chose his words carefully. "I believe in preparing for all outcomes. My team will ensure your safety regardless of the Vorak's intentions." "That's why High Command sent your unit. The best protection detail in the fleet," she sighed. "But remember, we're on a diplomatic mission. Weapons are authorized for defensive purposes only. Clear?" "Crystal clear, ma'am, though I hope the Vorak received the same memo." The ambassador's comms unit chimed. She glanced at it and frowned. "I need to take this. Good night, Sergeant." "Ma'am." Theo watched her leave, then returned his gaze to the stars, unable to shake the foreboding that had settled in his gut like a cold stone. Sleep eluded him that night. Instead, he spent hours reviewing security protocols with Sergeant Major Reyes, his second-in-command and oldest friend in the Corps. "You're overthinking this, Harrison," Reyes said, leaning back in his chair, muscular arms folded across his chest. "Standard protection detail. We've done dozens." "Not with the Vorak," Theo countered, studying the ship schematics. "And not this deep in contested space." Reyes shrugged. "Same enemy, different armor. They bleed just like everyone else." "It's not their blood I'm worried about. It's ours." Theo highlighted several junctions on the ship's layout. "I want double guards here, here, and here. And I want emergency evacuation protocols drilled into everyone's head." "Already done. My team could recite them in their sleep." "Good," Theo rubbed his eyes. "Because I've got a bad feeling about this one." Reyes laughed. "You've had a bad feeling about every mission since we left Mars. And I've been right more often than not." "True enough." Reyes stood, stretching. "Get some rest, Theo. Can't protect diplomats if you're falling asleep on your feet." But rest wouldn't come. Not with the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical force. The attack came without warning. 4 hours into the contested zone, the Harmony's Dream shuddered violently, throwing Theo from his bunk. Emergency klaxons wailed as the lighting switched to combat red. "All hands, battle stations." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "We are under attack. This is not a drill." Theo was moving before the announcement finished, sealing his combat armor and grabbing his sidearm. Protocol dictated that diplomatic vessels carried only defensive weapons, a restriction that now felt like a death sentence. He met Reyes in the corridor, both men heading toward the ambassador's quarters at a run. "Status," Theo demanded. 3 Vorak raiders, Reyes reported, his voice tight. "Hit our port shields before we knew they were there. Boarding parties detected in sections 7 and 9. "How the hell did they get through our detection grid?" "Someone gave them our shield frequencies. We've been betrayed." The ship shook again, more violently this time. Somewhere ahead, metal screamed as it was torn apart. "Breach in Section 5, shouted a voice over the comm. "They're inside the—" The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Theo's mind raced. Section 5 was between them and the ambassador's quarters. Change of plans. We need to get to the ambassador through the maintenance tunnels. They diverted to a service hatch. Theo punching in his override code. The narrow passage beyond was designed for repair drones, not fully armored Marines, but it was their only option. Harrison, his comm crackled with the captain's voice. We've lost control of the forward sections. Get the ambassador to the escape pods. Copy that. On our way. They crawled through the cramped tunnel, the sounds of battle growing louder, energy weapons discharging, the clash of boarding axes against bulkheads, screams that cut off too abruptly. They reached the access panel near the ambassador's quarters, just as the main door blew inward. Through the grating, Theo could see Vorak warriors pouring into the room, massive armored figures with ceremonial markings etched into their battle plate. The ambassador's security detail returned fire, but they were outmatched and outgunned. We need to move now, Theo hissed, preparing to kick out the panel. Reyes gripped his arm. Wait, look! Through the chaos, Theo saw the ambassador being hurried toward the emergency exit by her personal guard. They might make it to the escape pods if they moved quickly enough. Let's give them a distraction, Reyes suggested, a grim smile visible through his helmet visor. Theo nodded. On 3. They burst from the maintenance tunnel, weapons blazing. The Vorak, caught by surprise, turned to face this new threat. In the confusion, Theo glimpsed the ambassador disappearing through the emergency exit. Fall back to Junction 12, Theo ordered, as they retreated down the corridor, drawing the Vorak away from the ambassador's escape route. The aliens pursued, their guttural war cries echoing through the metal hallways. Theo and Reyes took turns providing covering fire, their discipline a stark contrast to the Vorak's berserker charge. They reached the junction, a crossroads of 4 corridors that would give them multiple retreat options. But, as they arrived, a second group of Vorak appeared from the adjacent passage, cutting off their escape. I'll hold them here, Reyes said, his voice unnaturally calm. Get to the escape pods. Not happening, Theo snapped. We go together or not at all. Don't be stupid, Harrison. The mission is to protect the ambassador. Reyes shoved him toward the southern corridor. Now go. That's an order, Sergeant. Before Theo could protest further, Reyes charged the advancing Vorak, firing as he went. The aliens fell back momentarily, surprised by the suicidal attack. Reyes! Theo shouted, but his friend didn't look back. Tell Maria I kept my promise, Reyes called over his shoulder. I didn't die alone. The last Theo saw of Sergeant Major Reyes was his silhouette, standing defiant against a wave of Vorak warriors, buying time with his life. Heart pounding. Theo ran. The escape pod bay was 2 levels down, accessible via emergency ladders if the lifts were compromised. He descended in a controlled slide, his gloves smoking against the metal rungs. The pod bay was chaos, crew members scrambling to launch, Vorak warriors attempting to cut them off. Through the melee, Theo spotted the ambassador being hurried into the last remaining pod by her personal guard. He fought his way toward them, using his sidearm sparingly. Ammunition was limited, and there were too many enemies to waste shots. Ambassador, he called out, dispatching a Vorak warrior with a precise blow to the neck joint of its armor. She looked back, eyes widening in recognition. Sergeant Harrison! Get in the pod, I'll hold them off. Her guard pulled her inside as Theo took up position at the entrance, creating a bottleneck the Vorak couldn't easily breach. One by one, they came at him, and one by one, they fell. The pod's ready, the guard called. Get in! Theo risked a glance backward. The small craft was at capacity, faces pressed against the viewport, waiting for him. Another wave of Vorak rounded the corner. Too many. Launch, he ordered. Now! But... That's an order. Protect the ambassador. The guard hesitated, then nodded grimly. The pod door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and seconds later, it shot from the bay, streaking toward the safety of open space. Theo turned back to face the advancing Vorak, knowing he'd just sacrificed his only means of escape. But if the ambassador made it out, the mission wasn't a failure. He fought with everything he had, his sidearm until it ran dry, then his combat knife, and finally his armored fists. The Vorak kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. A blow to his helmet cracked his visor. Another strike knocked him to his knees. As darkness closed in, his last thought was of Reyes, hoping his friend's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. The pod carrying Ambassador Cross and the survivors was the only one to escape the Harmony's dream. The others were destroyed by Vorak raiders, or failed to launch at all. Of the 173 souls aboard the diplomatic vessel, only 12 survived to tell the tale. Sergeant Theo Harrison was not among them. He was presumed dead, listed as killed in action in the official report. The truth, as it often does, proved more complicated. Consciousness returned slowly, pain being the first sensation to break through the darkness. Theo's entire body felt like it had been used as a training dummy for a platoon of heavy infantry. He forced his eyes open, blinking against the harsh light. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, rough-hewn stone rather than the smooth metal of a ship's interior. The air carried a strange scent, acrid and alien. "The warrior awakens," came a gravelly voice, speaking accented but understandable English. Theo turned his head, wincing at the movement. A Vorak stood nearby, its massive frame dwarfing the crude stone bench it sat upon. Unlike the warriors he'd fought on the ship, this one wore simple garments rather than battle armor, though the ceremonial scars marking its gray-green skin identified it as a warrior caste. "Where am I?" Theo managed, his voice raw. "The fortress of Queen Selena, on what your kind calls the Dead Moon." The Vorak studied him with unblinking yellow eyes. "You fought well on the ship. It is rare for one of your size to kill 7 Vorak warriors before falling." "The ambassador?" "Escaped. This displeases our queen greatly." The alien's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "But your performance has earned you a different fate than the other captives." Theo tried to sit up, discovering that while he was no longer in his armor, he wasn't bound either. "What happened to the others?" "Those who survived the boarding were deemed unworthy of the arena. They serve in the mining operations now." "And me?" "You have been chosen for the ritual combat. A great honor." Theo finally managed to push himself upright, taking stock of his surroundings. He was in a small cell carved from the moon's bedrock. A force field hummed across the entrance, casting everything in a faint blue glow. "I don't feel particularly honored," he said dryly. The Vorak made a sound that might have been laughter. "Few do, at first, but to die by the Queen's own hand is a privilege granted to few outsiders. I'd rather not die at all, if it's all the same to you. That choice is not yours to make. Rest now. Eat." The alien gestured to a tray of food near the bed. "The ritual is tomorrow, and it would dishonor our queen if you were too weak to provide a worthy challenge." With that, the Vorak departed, leaving Theo alone with his thoughts and the promise of imminent death. The food, at least, proved edible, if strange in texture and flavor. Theo forced himself to eat, knowing he would need every ounce of strength for whatever came next. Then, he methodically examined his cell, searching for weaknesses or potential weapons. There were none. The Vorak might be brutal, but they weren't careless. As he sat back on the hard pallet that served as a bed, Theo's thoughts turned to Reyes. Had his friend's sacrifice been in vain? If the ambassador had escaped? Perhaps not. But what good was a peace mission now, after such a blatant act of treachery? Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the distant sounds of the fortress, the rhythmic clanging of what might have been mining operations, the occasional roar that could have been machinery or beast or Vorak. He was awakened by the deactivation of the force field. 2 heavily armored Vorak warriors entered, their ceremonial armor gleaming in the dim light. "It is time, human," one said. "Come." Theo considered his options, quickly concluding that resistance would be futile. Better to conserve his strength and look for opportunities later. He was led through winding corridors carved from the moon's gray stone, passing other cells containing glimpses of captives, some human, others species he didn't recognize. None looked up as he passed. Hope, it seemed, was a luxury few could afford here. They emerged into a vast circular chamber, an arena. Theo realized with grim understanding. Tiered seating surrounded a central fighting pit, filled with coarse black sand. The stands were packed with vorak of various castes, their collective presence creating a low, thrumming energy that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. The guards directed him to a small antechamber off the main arena. Inside, a solitary figure waited, a female vorak, more slender than the warriors but no less imposing. Her skin was a paler shade of green, almost luminescent in the chamber's low light, and adorned with intricate markings that seemed to shift with her movements. "Queen Selena," one of the guards announced, both vorak dropping to one knee. The queen regarded Theo with alien intensity. "So this is the human who killed 7 of my warriors." Theo met her gaze, refusing to show fear. "They didn't give me much choice." "There is always choice in combat," she replied. "You chose to fight, rather than surrender. You chose to prioritize your ambassador's escape over your own. Interesting choices for a species that claims to value peace. Peace doesn't mean rolling over to die." Something like amusement flickered across her features. "Indeed not. Tell me, human, do you know why you are here?" "Your guard mentioned ritual combat. I assume that means I'm supposed to die for your entertainment." "Partially correct." She circled him slowly, assessing. "The ritual is traditional, yes, but it serves a purpose beyond mere spectacle. It is a test of strength, of will, of worthiness. And if I pass? None have in all my reign." She stopped before him. "But there is a first time for everything, is there not?" Before Theo could respond, she turned to a weapon rack on the wall and selected 2 identical swords, curved blades that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light. "The ceremonial blades," she explained, offering one to Theo. "They deactivate energy shields and neutralize powered armor. The combat will be decided by skill alone." Theo accepted the weapon cautiously, testing its balance. Despite its alien design, it felt natural in his hand, the weight perfectly distributed. "You seem surprised," the queen observed. "I expected something less fair." "The vorak are many things, human, but we are not without honor. The ritual must be equal if it is to have meaning." She stepped back, assuming a fighting stance that seemed both familiar and alien. "Are you prepared?" Theo raised his blade in response. "Do I have a choice?" "There is always choice," she repeated, "even in death." At a gesture from the queen, the guards escorted them into the arena proper. The crowd's rumbling intensified as they emerged. Though it lacked the bloodthirsty quality Theo had expected, there was something almost reverent in their collective voice. They took positions at opposite ends of the fighting pit, the black sand shifting beneath Theo's boots. He noted how it seemed to absorb sound, creating an unnatural pocket of silence around them, despite the thousands of spectators. A massive vorak in ornate armor stepped to the arena's edge, raising a ceremonial staff. "Today, we witness the test of conquest," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Queen Selena, daughter of the stars, defender of the ancient ways, faces the outsider who has earned the right of challenge." The queen raised her blade, and the crowd responded with a sound like distant thunder. "The rules are absolute," the announcer continued. "Combat ends with submission or death. No intervention is permitted once the ritual begins." He struck the staff against the stone floor 3 times, each impact reverberating through the arena. "Begin." Theo had expected an immediate attack, but the queen held her position, studying him with calculated patience. He did the same, years of combat training overriding the instinct to strike first. They circled slowly, feet sliding through the black sand, blades gleaming dully in the arena's harsh light. The queen moved first, a testing strike, swift but controlled. Theo parried easily, the blades meeting with a sound like crystalline chimes. "You have training," she observed, not breaking her stance. "Marine Corps Combat School, plus a few wars' worth of on-the-job experience." "Impressive!" She lunged again, this time with more purpose. Theo deflected the attack and countered, forcing her to retreat a step. The crowd murmured, but the queen's expression remained unchanged. What followed was a dance of blade and footwork, each testing the other's defenses, seeking weaknesses, measuring skill against skill. Theo quickly realized the queen was no ceremonial fighter. Her technique was refined, deadly, combining forms he recognized with alien movements he couldn't anticipate. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sweat poured down Theo's face, his breathing becoming labored. The queen showed fewer signs of fatigue, her alien physiology better adapted to the arena's conditions. "You fight well for a diplomat's guard," she said, during a momentary lull, blade held at the ready. "I wasn't always a guard," Theo replied, using the brief respite to catch his breath. "Spent 10 years in the expeditionary forces before this assignment." "Ah, a true warrior then." Something like respect flickered in her alien eyes. "That explains much." She attacked again, her movements subtly different, more aggressive, less cautious. Theo adapted, relying on instinct and experience to counter her increased intensity. Their blades locked, bringing them face to face. "Why this ritual?" Theo asked through gritted teeth. "What does it prove?" "It proves who is worthy to lead," she replied, breaking the lock with a powerful shove that sent Theo stumbling backward. "Strength determines all things. Where I come from, leadership is about more than who can kill better." Pretty words from a warrior culture that pretends to be otherwise. She pressed her advantage, forcing Theo to give ground. "We've studied your kind. You speak of peace while preparing for war. At least the Vorek are honest about our nature." Theo parried a vicious overhead strike, the impact sending shockwaves up his arm. "Maybe we're just trying to be better than our instincts." "A futile effort," she said, executing a complex series of attacks that required all of Theo's skill to defend against. Nature cannot be denied. One strike slipped past his guard, opening a shallow cut across his ribs. The crowd's rumble intensified, sensing first blood. Theo fell back, reassessing. The queen was faster, stronger, and showing no signs of tiring. His only advantage might be unpredictability, human tactics she hadn't encountered before. He switched to an aggressive stance, one taught for urban combat rather than formal dueling. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the change, but not the specific form. Theo attacked, using short, economical movements designed to create openings rather than overwhelm with force. For a moment, it worked. The queen retreated, adapting to this new approach. Then, her foot caught on an uneven patch of sand. It was a minor misstep, one she recovered from almost instantly. But in that fraction of a second, she was exposed, her guard open, her balance compromised. Theo saw the opening, muscle memory and combat instinct driving his blade forward in what would be a killing strike. Time seemed to slow. In that suspended moment, he saw not an alien queen but a person, a leader fighting for what she believed. Just as he was. He saw Reyes, choosing sacrifice over survival. He saw the ambassador, pursuing peace in a universe determined to choose war. At the last possible instant, Theo diverted his strike, driving his blade into the sand beside the queen, rather than through her exposed defense. The arena fell utterly silent. The queen stared at him, incomprehension written across her alien features. "Why?" she demanded, voice barely above a whisper. Theo straightened, letting his sword hang loose in his grip. Because there's already been enough killing. You had the advantage. The killing blow was yours by right. Some rights are better left unexercised. Theo took a deliberate step back, then did something that caused the entire arena to gasp in collective shock. He dropped his weapon, the ceremonial blade sinking into the black sand with a soft hiss. The Queen's expression shifted through confusion to something unreadable. You surrender? I choose not to kill, Theo corrected. There's a difference. For what seemed an eternity. The Queen stood frozen, blade still raised, poised between attacking and withdrawing. The arena remained deathly silent. Thousands of Vorak witnesses to this unprecedented moment. Finally, slowly, deliberately, Queen Selena lowered her weapon. In 10,000 cycles of the ritual, no challenger has ever done this. Maybe it's time for new traditions. A ripple moved through the crowd. Not the bloodthirsty roar of spectators denied a kill, but something more complex, almost contemplative. The Queen studied Theo with new intensity. There is a legend among our oldest texts, she said, her voice carrying in the unnatural silence, of one who would conquer through mercy rather than might. It is considered a children's tale, not prophecy. I'm not trying to conquer anything, Theo said. I'm just trying to stay true to what I believe.
And what is that human?
That strength without compassion isn't strength at all. It's just violence with a fancier name. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then, to the visible shock of every Vorak in the arena, she knelt and placed her ceremonial blade beside Theo's in the black sand. The ritual is complete, she announced, her voice ringing out across the stunned arena. But not as tradition dictates. The crowd erupted in chaos, some voices raised in outrage, others in confusion, a few in what might have been support. The Queen ignored them all, her focus solely on Theo. You will come with me, she said. Not a request, but not quite a command either. There is much to discuss. Guards surrounded them as they exited the arena, their expressions unreadable behind ceremonial masks. Theo walked beside the Queen, acutely aware of the precariousness of his position. One word from her, and he would be dead, unprecedented ritual or not. They were led to a chamber high in the fortress, its walls carved with ancient symbols Theo couldn't decipher. Large windows overlooked the barren lunar landscape, the black emptiness of space visible beyond. Leave us, the Queen ordered, and the guards departed without question, though Theo noted the reluctance in their movements. When they were alone, Selena's formal demeanor seemed to shift subtly. She moved to a stone table, where a clear liquid bubbled in a heating vessel, pouring 2 cups. This will not poison you, she said, offering one to Theo, though you may find the taste challenging. Theo accepted the cup cautiously, taking a small sip. The liquid burned like the strongest whiskey, but beneath the initial shock was a complex flavor, not entirely unpleasant. What happens now? He asked after a moment. That depends on many factors. The Queen sipped her own drink, watching him over the rim of her cup. What you demonstrated in the arena, it challenges our most fundamental beliefs. Some will see it as weakness, others as the fulfillment of ancient prophecy. And what do you see it as? I am uncertain. She set her cup down, moving to the window. The Vorak have survived for millennia by adhering to the principle that strength determines all. To question this is to question our very identity. Sometimes questioning is necessary for growth. She turned back to him, her alien features impossible to read. Perhaps, or perhaps it leads to dissolution and chaos. She gestured to the barren landscape outside. This moon was once a living world, before the Great War turned it to dust. Our ancestors survived by embracing strength above all else. Without that discipline, we would have perished. But you're not fighting for survival anymore. Theo pointed out. You're a spacefaring empire with technology that rivals or exceeds humanity's. Maybe different values are needed now. Values such as mercy. There was no mockery in her tone, only genuine curiosity. Mercy, compassion, cooperation, the things that build rather than destroy. She was silent for a long moment. Your ambassador was coming to offer terms of peace. Did you believe in that mission?
I believed in protecting her so she could try.
An honest answer. The Queen's lipless mouth curved slightly. The attack on your vessel was not sanctioned by the High Command. It was orchestrated by those who fear change, who believe that any alliance with other species will dilute our strength. Theo's eyes narrowed. You're saying it was a rogue operation?
I am saying that the Vorak, like humans, are not monolithic. We have our own politics.
The way she said the word suggested it tasted bitter. The warrior caste is divided on whether to continue expansion through conquest or to seek new paths. And which side are you on? Until today, I stood with tradition. Her gaze returned to the desolate landscape. Now, I find myself questioning certainties I once held absolute. A chime sounded, interrupting their conversation. The Queen touched a panel on the wall, and a holographic display materialized, showing the face of an older Vorak with elaborate scarification, marking him as high-ranking. General Vexthal, the Queen acknowledged. What is so urgent it requires interruption? Forgiveness, my Queen. But the High Council demands immediate audience. The ritual's unconventional conclusion has caused considerable unrest.
The Council does not summon me, General. I summon them.
Of course, my Queen. The General's discomfort was evident even to Theo's untrained eye. However, High Priest Corvin is invoking ancient law. He claims the ritual's interruption threatens cosmic balance. The Queen's posture stiffened slightly. I will address the Council shortly. Prepare the Chamber of Voices. The hologram disappeared, and Selena turned back to Theo, her expression grave. It seems our conversation must continue later. The political consequences of today's events are already manifesting. What will happen to me? For now, you remain under my protection. Beyond that. She made a gesture that might have been the Vorak equivalent of a shrug. Much depends on what transpires in the Council chamber. And if the Council decides I should die after all? Then I will be forced to make a choice between tradition and something new. She studied him with unnerving intensity. Rest, human. Guards will bring food and fresh clothing. You will need your strength for what comes next. With that cryptic statement, she departed, leaving Theo alone with his thoughts and the strange, alien vista beyond the window. The quarters he'd been given were Spartan, but comfortable by human standards, a significant upgrade from the cell he'd occupied earlier. True to the Queen's word, food and clothing were brought. The latter, a simplified version of Vorak garments adapted for human physiology. Hours passed with no word from the Queen or any indication of what was happening beyond his chamber. Theo used the time to rest, knowing that whatever came next would likely require all his reserves of strength and wit. It was deep into what his internal clock registered as night when the door to his chamber slid open. Expecting guards, Theo was surprised to find Queen Selena herself, alone and dressed in simpler attire than before. The Council deliberations continue, she said without preamble. I have a brief respite before returning. How's it going? Theo asked, rising from where he'd been seated on the edge of the bed. Political maneuvering is the same in any species. I imagine. Tedious and fraught with hidden agendas. She moved to the window, gazing out at the stars. The warrior caste is divided. The priests claim ancient law demands your execution. The scholars argue that prophecy suggests otherwise. And you? What do you argue? She turned to face him. Her alien features softened somehow in the dim light. I argue that perhaps, after 10,000 years, we should consider that our ancestors may not have had all the answers. That's a dangerous position for a queen. Yes. The single word carried weight beyond its brevity. Our history is filled with rulers who fell after suggesting less radical changes. Then why risk it? She studied him for a long moment before answering. Because what you did in the arena, it awakened questions I have carried silently for many cycles. Questions about whether conquest alone can sustain a civilization forever. It can't, Theo said simply. History, human history at least, is pretty clear on that point. Empires that only take eventually collapse. And yet your own species continues to expand its territory. We're trying to do it differently. Not always successfully, but we're trying. The Queen made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your ambassador said something similar during previous negotiations. I dismissed it as diplomatic posturing. Maybe it's time to reconsider. Perhaps. She moved closer, studying him with those alien eyes that somehow conveyed emotion despite their strangeness. Tell me, Sergeant Harrison, if you had killed me in the arena, what would have happened next? Another Vorak ruler would have taken your place. The cycle would have continued. And because you chose mercy. That depends on what you choose to do with the opportunity. Something shifted in her expression. A recognition, perhaps, or a decision reached. I must return to the council, but I wanted you to know that whatever happens, your actions today have already changed things that were thought unchangeable. She departed as abruptly as she had arrived, leaving Theo with the distinct impression that far more had been communicated than the words themselves conveyed. The next day brought new developments. Guards arrived to escort Theo, not to the Queen's chambers or back to the arena, but to a vast hall deep within the fortress. The Chamber of Voices, Theo presumed, recalling the Queen's conversation with the general. The space was imposing, a circular chamber with tiered seating surrounding a central platform. Various castes of Vorak occupied different sections, their status indicated by elaborate markings and ornaments. At the highest tier sat the Queen, flanked by what appeared to be military and religious figures. Theo was led to the central platform, acutely aware of the hundreds of alien eyes fixed upon him. Sergeant Theo Harrison of Earth, announced a herald, the formal title surprising Theo. How had they learned his full name and rank? The Queen rose, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. The council has deliberated through the night on the matter of the ritual and its implications. Before judgment is rendered, the outsider will be permitted to speak. A murmur rippled through the assembly, clearly. This was not standard procedure. Theo took a moment to gather his thoughts, conscious that what he said next might determine not just his fate, but potentially the relationship between their species for generations to come. I am a soldier, he began, his voice stronger than he'd expected. I've spent most of my life fighting. I've killed to protect others and to survive. I understand the value of strength and the necessity of force. He paused, scanning the alien faces surrounding him. But I've also seen what happens when strength becomes the only virtue, when the ability to destroy is valued above the ability to create. I've seen worlds reduced to ash because two sides couldn't imagine any outcome except total victory or defeat. The chamber remained silent, hundreds of Vorak listening with inscrutable expressions. Yesterday, in your arena, I had a choice. I could take a life or spare it. In that moment, I realized something. True strength isn't about who can kill more effectively. It's about knowing when not to kill at all. He turned slowly, addressing all sections of the chamber equally. Your Queen speaks of ancient prophecies and new questions. I can't speak to those. I'm just a Marine who made a choice. But if that choice resonates with something in your own traditions, perhaps it's worth considering what that means. He faced the Queen directly. Humans and Vorak have been enemies because we've both defined strength too narrowly. Maybe it's time we both reconsidered what true power looks like. With that, he fell silent, For several long moments, the chamber remained utterly still. Then, from different sections, voices began to rise, some in obvious objection, others in what sounded like support, still others asking questions in the Vorak language Theo couldn't understand. The Queen raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. "The outsider has spoken," she declared. "Now the Council will render its judgment." What followed was unlike any political proceeding Theo had witnessed. Various representatives stood to speak, warriors arguing for tradition, priests citing ancient texts, scholars presenting historical precedents. Through it all, the Queen remained silent, listening with regal composure. Finally, an elderly Vorak that Theo recognized as High Priest Corvin rose to speak. His voice, though aged, carried authority that commanded attention. "For 10,000 cycles, the ritual has defined us," he intoned. "The strong lead, the weak follow or perish. This is the way of nature, the way of the stars themselves." Murmurs of agreement rose from certain sections. "And yet," the priest continued, "our oldest texts speak of the merciful conqueror, one who would win not through force of arms but through strength of spirit. This prophecy has been dismissed as allegory, as a teaching tool for the young rather than a vision of what might come." He turned his ancient eyes toward Theo. "I do not know if this human is the fulfillment of prophecy, but I know this. In 10,000 cycles, no challenger has ever done what he did. This alone deserves consideration." The priest faced the Queen directly. "My judgment, as keeper of the ancient ways, is this. Let the human live. Let him serve as advisor to the Queen, that we might learn whether mercy can indeed be strength. Let us observe rather than conclude, question rather than assume." The chamber erupted in voices, some raised in outrage, others in support. The Queen allowed the discord to continue for several moments, before again raising her hand for silence. "The Council has spoken with many voices, as is proper," she declared. "As Queen, the final judgment is mine." She rose to her full height, impressive even among her own kind. "Sergeant Theo Harrison of Earth will live. Moreover, he will serve as liaison between our peoples. The diplomatic vessel that was attacked will be restored and recommissioned as a joint project, crewed by both Vorak and humans." Shocked silence greeted this unprecedented declaration. "This is not peace," the Queen clarified. "Not yet. It is exploration of possibilities beyond conquest and submission, beyond the binary of victor and vanquished." She looked directly at Theo. "The human showed mercy when tradition demanded death. Perhaps there is wisdom in this that 10,000 cycles of tradition have obscured. We will learn what we can from this wisdom, even as we maintain our strength." Her gaze swept the chamber. "Those who attacked the diplomatic vessel acted against my authority. They will face justice according to our laws. Those who seek to undermine this new direction will be reminded that I remain Queen by right of strength, a strength that now includes the wisdom to recognize new paths when they appear." The pronouncement left no room for debate. One by one, the Council members acknowledged the Queen's decree with formal gestures of acceptance, though Theo noted the reluctance in some. As the assembly dispersed, Theo was escorted back to the Queen's private chambers. She joined him shortly thereafter, her formal regalia replaced by simpler attire. "That was unexpected," Theo said when they were alone. "For us both, perhaps." The Queen poured 2 cups of the strong liquid they had shared before. "When I entered the arena yesterday, I expected either to kill or be killed. Instead, I find myself presiding over the most significant change in Vorak governance in millennia. Will it last? That remains to be seen." She handed him a cup. "There will be resistance, assassination attempts, perhaps, challenges both open and hidden." "Sounds like you could use an experienced bodyguard," Theo suggested with half a smile. "Indeed." She studied him over her cup. "The position of liaison I mentioned
It is not merely diplomatic. You would serve as advisor, yes, but also as protector. There are few I can trust fully in the transitional times ahead. You trust me after one arena fight? I trust what I saw in that moment when you could have killed, but chose not to. Such moments reveal more truth than years of diplomatic words. Theo considered this. What about my duty to Earth, to the Marines? Your ambassador survived. Once communications are established, arrangements can be made. I suspect your leaders will find the opportunity to place someone in my inner circle. Valuable. And if I refuse? Then, you will be returned to your people with full honors. This is not imprisonment. Sergeant Harrison, it is an offer. Theo gazed out at the stars, visible through the chamber's window. Considering his options, return to Earth, to the familiar routine of military life, or stay here, at the precipice of something unprecedented, a potential shift in relations between two powerful species. I'll need to contact my superiors, he said finally. But until then, I accept, provisionally. A prudent approach. Something like satisfaction flickered across the Queen's alien features. Tomorrow, we begin the work of rebuilding the vessel your people called Harmony's Dream. A fitting name for what we attempt, and a fitting memorial for those who died aboard her, Theo added quietly, thinking of Reyes. Indeed. The Queen raised her cup in what Theo recognized as a toast. To those who gave their lives, and to the possibilities their sacrifice has opened. Theo raised his own cup, the strange liquid catching the light like liquid silver. To possibilities. In the days that followed, word spread throughout both human and Vorak territories of the unprecedented events. A Marine who had spared a warrior queen. A ritual combat that ended in neither death nor victory, but something entirely new. Ambassador Cross, safely returned to Earth, was dispatched once more to the dead moon, this time with a full military escort that remained in orbit while she descended to meet with Queen Selena and her new human advisor. Sergeant Harrison, she greeted him, surprise and pleasure evident in her voice. The report said you died buying us time to escape. Rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated, ma'am, Theo replied with a small smile. Though it was a close thing. And now you're, what exactly? A prisoner? A diplomat? A little of both, perhaps, Queen Selena interjected, entering the chamber. Though increasingly more the latter than the former, the diplomatic discussions that followed were unlike any in recorded history between the two species. With Theo serving as bridge between cultures, translating not just words, but intentions. Progress came more rapidly than anyone had dared hope. The rebuilt Harmony's Dream was launched 6 months later, a hybrid vessel incorporating both human and Vorak technology, crewed by representatives of both species. Theo stood on the bridge beside Queen Selena as the ship broke orbit, the dead moon receding behind them. Having second thoughts? The Queen asked, noting his contemplative expression. Thinking of Reyes, Theo admitted. He died to give the ambassador a chance to escape. I wonder what he'd make of all this. From what you've told me of him, I suspect he would approve. Yeah, Theo smiled faintly. He always did say I thought too much. Sometimes you just have to take the leap, he'd tell me. Wise words. The Queen's gaze returned to the view screen, where stars stretched before them. We are both taking leaps now, are we not? Into uncharted territory. That's what exploration's all about. As the Harmony's Dream accelerated toward distant stars, Theo reflected on the strange path that had led him here, from Marine to diplomat, from enemy to ally, from prisoner to something more complex than either he or the Queen had yet to find. The journey ahead was uncertain. The political challenges on both sides remained formidable. But in that moment of choice in the arena, something fundamental had shifted, not just for two individuals, but potentially for two civilizations. Mercy
It seemed, might indeed be its own form of strength and compassion, its own kind of conquest. Beside him, Queen Selena watched the stars with eyes that had witnessed millennia of tradition and now gazed upon the possibility of change. Between them, unspoken but palpable, hung the recognition that whatever came next, they would face it together. The warrior who chose mercy, and the queen who dared to question the very foundations of her society. The Harmony's dream continued its journey into the unknown, carrying with it the hope that ancient enemies might yet become something new, perhaps allies, perhaps friends, perhaps something for which neither language yet had a word.